Have you been holding on to a nonprofit idea that would benefit a community or social cause, but you just don't know what to do to get started? Well, stay tuned to this video where we'll share 8 steps to starting your nonprofit organization. Hey everybody, and welcome back to the channel. This is Tasha with West Financial Services, LLC, where we provide tax strategies, business services, and financial education to help you achieve your economic goals and live without financial limitations. In today's video, I'll talk about the 8 steps you need to take to get your nonprofit organization up and running. A nonprofit is a type of business organization that operates for either a public or a social benefit, and it provides its services without the primary goal of making money. Before we get into the steps for starting a nonprofit, I want to put to rest a few myths that keep many people from acting on their desire to start their nonprofit. So here are 3 common myths about nonprofits. Myth number 1, nonprofits are not allowed to earn a profit. Actually, nonprofits can make a profit, and they should try to have some level of positive revenue to build a reserve fund and ensure sustainability. The key difference between nonprofit organizations and for-profit businesses is that a nonprofit organization can't distribute its profits to any private individual. So with a nonprofit organizations, those profits have to be reinvested into the organization to grow it. Myth number 2, nonprofits only use volunteers and can't pay staff. The fact is that as of 2019, the nonprofit sector employs over 24 million people. That's about 14% of the United States workforce. Nonprofit staff are allowed to be paid a reasonable salary, and a good guideline for determining these salaries would be to base them on what for-profit sector employees receive for the same or similar duties. Myth number 3, nonprofits can't charge fees for goods or services. While nonprofits are able to generate revenue from donations, grants, or charitable gifts, they're not restricted to these forms of income. Nonprofits can legally charge fees for goods or services related to the mission of their organization. This can be done by direct sales or by entering into contracting agreements with companies or government entities. So think about huge nonprofit organizations such as the YMCA or Goodwill. They charge fees for goods and services to generate revenue. Your nonprofit can do the same. So now that we put those myths to rest, let's move on into the 8 steps that you should take to get your nonprofit up and running. Step number 1, research. In the planning stages of your nonprofit, you're going to invest some time in researching. Now, I know it's normal to be excited about your startup and you want to get up and running right away. But trust me, rushing will usually end up costing you more time than you will save. You'll first want to check your state's rules and requirements for starting and operating a nonprofit organization. Next, you want to determine the purpose of your nonprofit. Why will it exist and what need will it meet? Hand in hand in determining this is to determine whether there is a need for your service. Also, be careful that you're not falling so in love with your idea for the nonprofit that you overlook signs of a lack of need. Research other organizations in your area who provide similar services to learn what you should and shouldn't do when it comes to running your nonprofit organization. Sometimes in your research, you may find that it would be smarter to partner with an existing organization, especially if you see that the sector is already oversaturated with the number of providers of the service. You'll also want to research regarding your specific industry or sector to determine if you'll be required to obtain any special licensing or certification. Whatever you do, you don't want to skip over the step of researching. I'm a firm believer that knowledge makes the world go round. And like I said before, researching before you get started is not only going to save you time, but tons of energy and maybe even money. What's more, once you've learned what you need to know, you can pass that knowledge on to others. Step 2, select a board of directors. Nonprofits are required to have a governing board or a board of directors, and this board should be formed even prior to incorporation. Some, but not all states require a minimum number of board members, so you're going to want to check with your specific state to see if this applies. Board members are responsible for establishing organization policies and procedures and overseeing the programs and activities of the organization. Step 3, file articles of incorporation. The next step is to register your organization's name and file articles of incorporation in your state. You'll want to first check and make sure that no other active corporation in your state is operating with the name you want to use for your organization. When you file your articles, most states will require that you include a purpose statement for your organization. So this is required to help further determine that the organization is not in existence just to turn a profit. Finally, when filing, you're going to need to appoint a registered agent in your articles of incorporation. So just as with the board of directors requirement, make sure to check your state's requirement to determine if there are a minimum number of members that need to be listed in your articles. Also, guys, it's my recommendation that at this point in the process, you also check with your local and county government to determine if you'll be required to obtain any additional city or county business licenses. Step number 4, obtain an EIN number. An EIN, or Employee Identification Number, is a unique 9-digit number that identifies your business for tax purposes. It's similar to a social security number, but it's meant for business-related items only, and it's used by the IRS to identify your business. Applying for an employer identification number is a free service, and it's offered by the IRS, and there are 4 ways to apply for your business's EIN. The instructions for each method of applying can be found on the IRS's website. You can apply either online, by fax, by mail, or by phone. And also in this step, you'll want to obtain a state tax ID number for your organization if your state requires it. And you guys can check out my previous video for more detailed information on how to get your EIN number for free. Step 5, draft bylaws. Now, while not all states require bylaws, they do serve a very useful purpose. Your nonprofit's bylaws are like your organization's guidebook. Bylaws establish procedures for activities like holding elections, organizing meetings, and other operations of the nonprofit. This is probably one of the most important documents in your organization, so you want to make sure to check your state's requirement regarding bylaws. Bylaws are generally going to include the following components: the statement of purpose, which explains why your organization exists; leadership information, which defines how many directors your nonprofit will have, how long their terms are, and the process for changing directors for any reason. Meeting guidelines, which describe the process for the meetings of your board of directors, and this includes establishing the number of times they'll meet each year, along with when and where those meetings will occur. Voting procedures, which define how many members must be present for a vote, as well as how many votes are necessary for an initiative to pass. The conflict of interest policy clearly spells out the consequences that will be given if members take an action that conflicts with the cause of the organization. And finally, in some states, having a dissolution clause is a legal requirement for a nonprofit organization. The dissolution clause spells out how the organization will distribute assets in case it dissolves. Normally, a nonprofit is required to distribute assets to another or other nonprofit organizations. Guys, don't be intimidated by the task of creating your bylaws. There are tons of bylaw templates and examples online that you can use for inspiration when you create bylaws for your organization. Step 6, hold an initial board meeting. During the first board meeting, the board needs to solidify the name and legal address for the organization that will be used on all of its legal documents, and it will need to authorize new officers to make business decisions for the organization. Also, in this initial meeting, the board will adopt bylaws if they have already been drafted, or they'll start creating the bylaw document. Board meetings should be held regularly and documented in the meeting minutes, and there should also be an agenda for each meeting. Step 7, register as a charity. So if your nonprofit is going to be fundraising or soliciting and accepting donations, it must legally file as a charitable organization. This requirement is known as the Charitable Solicitation Registration. So requirements surrounding charitable soliciting vary from state to state, so you'll need to research your state's specific requirements. Whatever you do, do not attempt to fundraise until you've either satisfied the requirement or confirmed that your organization is exempt from it. Doing so could get your organization shut down. And step 8, apply for tax-exempt or 501c3 status. While this step isn't a requirement for all nonprofit organizations, if your organization brings in a certain level of revenue, it may be. So again, be sure to do your research to determine if applying for tax-exempt status is a requirement for your organization. Even if not required, it is definitely beneficial and worth considering. Filing for and receiving 501c3 status carries two major benefits. Your organization becomes exempt from paying tax on its revenue, and also those who make donations to your organization can write those donations off on their taxes. 501c3 status is approved and recognized by the IRS. In the past couple of years, they've streamlined the process for applying for this status, and now it's completed entirely online. To apply for tax-exempt status, you'll need to complete either the short form 1023-EZ or the long form 1023 on the IRS website. The basic difference between the two versions is that Form 1023-EZ is less expensive, faster, and simpler to complete than the Form 1023. Most smaller domestic nonprofits are going to qualify to complete the Form 1023-EZ. In addition, Form 1023-EZ costs $275 compared to the $600 for Form 1023. and you can expect the IRS to process your documents in half the time. All organizations are able to apply using the Form 1023, but to use the 1023-EZ, your organization has to meet certain conditions. So beneath this video, I'll put the link for you to access the 1023-EZ instruction booklet, which contains the Form 1023-EZ eligibility worksheet. The eligibility worksheet is going to help you determine if you're eligible to apply for tax-exempt status using the Form 1023-EZ. Okay, so there you have it. 8 steps to starting your nonprofit. So you notice I didn't say 8 easy steps, and that's because the process can be time and labor intensive. But just take one step at a time and make sure you're building your organization on a solid foundation. Trust me, in the end, it's going to be worth it. So guys, if you learned something from today's video, please give it a thumbs up and share so we can help others who may be thinking about launching their own nonprofit organizations. Also, I'd be honored if you subscribe to the channel. In addition, if you need assistance through the process of setting up your nonprofit, West Financial Services, LLC does offer that service, so give us a call for a quote or schedule a consultation to discuss your specific needs. Our contact information is listed in the section beneath this video. As always, guys, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.